what are some of the milestones you think a founder actually needs to have achieved very well before bringing on an SDR?
I think they have to close a couple deals cold. I mean, every founder you work with so many early stage, of course, you're going to leverage your network and warm connections, like grow your company that way. But until you can actually show the motion, until you can pick up the phone, until you can send an email, until you can send a LinkedIn message, until you can kind of say, is this a good message? Is this a bad message? Am I messaging the right person? You don't really get to earn somebody doing that work for you. Can you prove out a cold motion? Or totally other topic, should you be investing in marketing first? And I think that's really a big kind of deciding moment for founders. And I think a lot of them think an SDR, that's going to solve it faster, because a lot of founders don't understand marketing, but hot take for another day.
I totally agree. And I think they think I need more pipeline. Therefore, if I throw an SDR at it, I will get pipeline. I am so thrilled to have you with us today, Alexandra. As we were just talking, so it turns out I thought we had a great mutual friend, and turns out like the mutual friend, it was a new friend to you.
Brand new friend.
But who is now a great friend, Peggy Reyes, who's amazing here in New York.
Taught me so much about developer marketing because I knew nothing. So thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy. Yeah. She brought you to a conference that we hosted up at Bear Mountain last summer with 100 other operators in New York. And I'm so sorry you got bus sick.
I got bus sick. I don't know if you actually know that I did throw up at the brewery right before I met you. We met on a bus when I was really bus sick, and you were asking me about something, and I was like, I am just trying to survive.
I know. I was like, so tell me your best like go-to-market mode plays, and you're like, please, for the love of God.
I thought I had it, and then we were at the brewery. Peggy and I sitting by ourselves is because I threw up. So,
well, that's why we have you back today. Yes. Hopefully,
there's a redemption arc.
No promises, but in general,
we'll do my best.
Truly have a conversation. And what I do want to say is, since Bear Mountain, I've been following you on LinkedIn, and where there's this like very parasocial to say, but I'm like, I feel like Alexandra has some really great hot takes. Obviously, you roll a chalk, but also in the last 15 years, leading go-to-market and seeing lots of different companies and functions and stages and sizes. So I'm so thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So I always kick off the pod with this question, which is, what's the one thing you think founders should know, specifically B2B SaaS founders perhaps, before they start a company?
God, I've worked with so many B2B founders, and it's always a journey knowing what they do and don't know. I think it's like very apropos to say they don't know shit about SDRs. I don't even know if they know the difference between an SDR and a BDR or an XDR or whatever the hell we call them nowadays. Yeah. I know that they don't know anything about it, and they don't know where to even start.
Well, so let's break that down, right? Because the reality, I think, is like most of us have not gone to SaaS school, right? So it's like everything we do kind of learn, like we look online, we watch some videos. So if you can break it down even like SDR, BDR, what you're seeing, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, the acronyms are kind of nonsense. I think we can get into the whole like go-to-market title that's so in vogue right now. But basically, I think one of the things that founders do is see, I don't know, Databricks did this and they did it really well, or Snowflake's did this. Like, I have to import this model. And I think one of the first things founders try and do is make BDRs lead gen instead of making BDRs essentially a product marketing resource. And so essentially when you bring someone in and you're like, I figured out this motion, and you're like, I'm going to give you outreach and I'm going to give you some Apollo context, and like they're just going to go. Broken clock is right twice a day, but often that is not the playbook that's going to work for them.
That's so fascinating because that is the typical playbook, would you say? I mean, I think of maybe seed stage founders, right? We work with many, we know many, right? Founders, again, are the ones who start out closing deals on their own. So maybe they've closed 10 deals. Maybe they close even like 20 deals on their own. But they're down to a point where they're like, I can't possibly close deals and do outreach and outbound and run the company. So I want to bring on an SDR who can join me and who can therefore help me do outbound to therefore get more leads. So like, I guess break that down. Do you think that is totally like actually wrong?
I don't think it's totally actually wrong, but there's an interstitial step that needs to happen, which is like some level of reflection of what's working and not working in your motion. And a lot of the times what's working in your motion is your own gravitas and your own presence. Your resume as a founder is going to have much more magic in the room or on the phone or even, from the email address that it gets sent to. And so you're almost placing undue pressures and sort of like fake outcomes on somebody who is likely very junior, and is being given metrics that you essentially didn't have to hit yourself. So there's this really big reflection moment that I see a lot of founders sort of skip.
I can't, agree more with that, right? And I think a lot of founders, they're like, well, I'm just a regular person too. I was just figuring it out myself. And, at least a rep will come in and have a lot more experience, but an SDR generally does not have any experience. So maybe we can jump to that in a little bit. But I guess going to your point is, what are some of the milestones you think a founder actually needs to have achieved very well before bringing on an SDR? Because even like if I said 10 deals, 20 deals, like that's not necessarily always indicator enough that your company is mature enough or the motion is mature enough to handle bringing on a very, very junior SDR.
I think they have to close a couple deals cold. I mean, every founder you work with so many early stage, of course, you're going to leverage your network and warm connections, like grow your company that way. But until you can actually show the motion, until you can pick up the phone, until you can send an email, until you can send a LinkedIn message, until you can kind of say, is this a good message? Is this a bad message? Am I messaging the right person? You don't really get to earn somebody doing that work for you. Yeah. And I don't even have to tell you about like the founder journey, but I think that's the one thing is like, can you prove out a cold motion? Or totally other topic, should you be investing in marketing first? And I think that's really a big kind of deciding moment for founders. And I think a lot of them think an SDR, that's going to solve it faster, because a lot of founders don't understand marketing, but hot take for another day. Yeah. So that's where I'd kind of start there.
I totally agree. And I think they think I need more pipeline. Therefore, if I throw an SDR at it, I will get pipeline. Which might happen.
I said broken clock is right twice a day. There was one company I went into and they had an SDR and he had a couple of great logos that came in. And I did this like basic analysis of outreach. I'm like, you sent 22,000 emails to get these 10 or 11 meetings. And so this recency bias of, I got 10 meetings from this person, let me hire another one and they're going to get 10 meetings. And that whole linear sort of, whatever you want to call it, except your 22,000 emails are infinite, right? You're going to get opt-outs. You're going to hit the same people. And so without really thinking through what made him or her successful, just plugging in headcount on a spreadsheet is not going to be scalable.
Totally. I mean, I feel like we could totally just even dive in, right? Even if, let's say, you're able to bring on an SDR successfully, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff we can go back and rewind to. But if you bring on an SDR and you give them a playbook that worked for you as a founder, which again, I would say like translation between the two. There's like quite a bit of like translation that needs to happen, because just because a founder said it just like that, like I don't always think if an SDR said it word for word, it would be effective. But let's just say like there is some sort of a playbook for them to use. What are you seeing nowadays, right? Like there's so much noise out there. Yes. I mean, emails getting sent out, to your point, with 22,000. It's actually very easy to send 22,000 emails now. That's a problem,
It's actually really difficult to send 22,000 emails.
You think so? Because of the email warming?
Yeah, and we can kind of get into that. But sort of my take over the past, 8 or 9 years is we kind of screw ourselves. So Outreach and Sales Loft came out. Everyone's like, sales enablement, I could do high velocity. And you go to that like, go, go, go. The market sort of recoiled and was just like, we're getting too much shit. We're getting the same templates over and over. And then everyone moved to ABM, ABX. I still don't know what that means. And then it was like, it's too slow. And now we're in the age, is all we know, we're in the GPT and AI age. And everyone brought in AI SDR, and Gmail essentially has reacted. And so not only is AI leveraging sending tons of these emails with pretty poor personalization, it actually caused Google to start using its own AI back to scan these messages and block them. So 22,000 emails, again, may have worked. I don't know if it's going to work for very much longer.
Yeah. Well, for sure, the quality is not good. Yeah. Right. And so it goes to the whole, of the challenge, which is like, there's more noise than ever. And I think everyone's trying to break through it, right? And so the reality is, like, when you think about SDRs, they basically have two channels, more or less. They have emails or they have cold calling. I mean, I'd love to hear from you what you think is actually working in today's day and age.
Yeah. So, God, if you follow any LinkedIn talking head, they're going to be like, cold calling is dead. Cold calling is not dead. Interestingly, where I am at Chalk, we sell to data engineering. We sell to ML ops platform folks. Like the guys you really don't expect to be looking at LinkedIn, it is by and far our number one channel. Amazing. Like LinkedIn is absolutely crushing it for us. And there's some nuance on, certain people get in certain channels, but I would never have come in and say, we're going to invest in LinkedIn selling to developers. Yet previously, at a previous role, I had guys cold calling and getting the CISOs of Fortune 500s on the phone through a cold outbound. Right. And so I think what you just said, kind of flipping it around, is like there's not only two channels. Like every time you start a company, and even a brand new SDR joining a company needs to have a refreshed mindset. And I actually have a bit of a mantra that, sorry, future applicants, that I actually don't like hiring SDRs with SDR experience, because I feel like they're either going to bring bad habits or they're going to bring conviction from what is essentially often a brand new motion. And I think founders make a mistake where it's like, oh, well, I'm selling a dev tool, so I must have someone with like dev experience, or they must have sold security. No. That is not the skills that you should be looking for. And I think taking it back to your original question of cutting through the noise, it's being really intentional, really doing the things that don't scale, not being bogged down by tooling, which I'd love to dig into that a little bit.
I know. I'm excited for your tool rant. That you had a great tool rant. So
thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful because, again, I'm so glad you said, like, actually LinkedIn works great for SDRs, right? And do you mean specifically like LinkedIn messaging, or do you mean like social selling?
I would say
obviously social selling is great, but as it pertains to your SDRs,
it really depends. I have a couple SDRs who actually kind of making names for themselves about how they were successful as SDRs, and the reason that's kind of somewhat working is they are already connected with all of the prospects they are working, so you kind of create this constellation effect. But actually, like, I think InMail suck. I have never opened an InMail. Have you opened an InMail?
I've never opened InMail.
No. So I have this very, very manual play that it's gotten better, but they send a connection request as themselves, no context. And then they kind of reach and then don't want to totally give away the secret sauce. But we do this fun sort of introduction to the founder. So you can still leverage founders in a different way. Yeah. But they are the founder. They are just cosplaying who these folks are.
Of course.
But the prospect's kind of like, okay, this SDR is in my shit. Like, what is this? Maybe I click on it. But then you go, oh God, like this person actually, we're talking about that account. Oh, I must answer them. And the right SDR is going to be like, I don't give a shit how the meeting got booked. Like, I orchestrated it. And that's really the mentality you need at early stage is, how am I going to get this motion going? And what roles can I potentially play? That's not just book the meeting.
Totally.
And I think that's kind of what's getting really interesting out there.
And I think the one word to use in there was manual.
Yes.
Right? Because again, going back to 22,000, whether it's emails or whatever it is, you in theory can just click a button these days and a message can go out really to hundreds of people,
anybody,
thousands, right? And there are a lot of tools actually on LinkedIn that automate, but then again, it goes back to the InMail problem, which I mean, I'm not reading, you're not reading.
Sorry.
Right? And so it's just a reminder, and I say this a lot to especially my early stage founders, like, again, do things that don't scale. And because that's the only way you also learn in the early days, right? And there's so much of that learning, which is like who to target, what to say when you target them, right? And all the nuances there. But I love that, it sounds like it's still pretty manual, but you need almost that quality over quantity.
Yes, 100%. And that's where,
which people seem to have maybe forgotten.
They don't give a shit anymore. And it's funny because I think, one of the things I've seen in a couple places is founders don't want to invest in a way that they wouldn't buy. And they're like, I've never answered a cold call. I don't check my email. Screw LinkedIn. Yeah. And you really sort of cut out any sort of confidence and experimentation when you're setting the tone of, I wouldn't buy this way, so why would my customer? I think that kind of really makes SDR life really hard. But
that's an interesting pro tip.
Yeah.
Very important thing to remember. Yeah.
I don't know. I try to I've worked directly for founders or CEOs my entire life, starting at a hedge fund 15 years ago. And so there's always a role to play in terms of kind of incepting, doing a little inception play on some of this stuff. But I think, we have a hall of fame of shitty SDR emails. I get all the time because I consulted hi, Alexandra Consulting Co. Let me help you with, just really bad personalization. Or my favorite is when I lived in California, I volunteered at the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, which means I worked with seals. And I will get SDR personalization to find something and be like, oh my God, Alex, I saw that you were working with harbor seals. Here is my new MarTech bullshit. And you're like, oh dear God. But they didn't even, it's not their fault. It's their manager's fault.
It's not their fault, right? And I think a reminder is that SDRs generally are quite junior. It sounds like for you particular, you're like, I don't necessarily even want an SDR from another role or another SDR specific role, maybe from another past experience. But I think that's something that I spend a lot of time with our founders on. Just you're going to have to spend a lot of time managing, coaching, training, an SDR generally, right? So what feedback do you have on that?
Yeah, it's, I'm still one of my biggest roles is being an SDR manager. It's very frontline. Everything's sort of changing. You get a hot response. You get them on the phone. And like being in the trenches with them, I think is really important. I think the thing to also kind of, we're as operators, we're metrics driven. Meetings are a massive lagging indicator. You have no idea something's going wrong until the scoreboard says 0. And I think that's a big mistake that founders make because we're so, they're so outcome driven and they can just, stay up 24 hours and make it work. Where you're not going to really know what's working or not knowing or working in your process when you're waiting for what it looks like at the end of the quarter.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where it's funny you mentioned about the metric because it's something we've talked about actually just on with another guest. It's like people are so obsessed with metrics, but they can only sometimes say so much or they say it, but later. Yeah. Any other pro tips in terms of, hey, getting an SDR to get out there and help open doors to meetings, right? And breaking through the noise and or even just knowing the right thing to say. Because I think so much of it comes down to messaging, right? And quality messaging, which is easier said than done.
Yeah. And I think I sort of have a unique background in that I've straight line managed enterprise marketing teams. And previous outbound teams. I'm now overseeing all 3 functions, which is sort of untraditional. But like ask any of my SDRs, they'll roll their eyes. I make them do what's called an account map. And so we're very intentional. We'll find someone from de-anonymization tooling. They will look and see, okay, this very specific piece of technology is mentioned in my account that I'm watching. And what they do, and most AI folks would be horrified, it's a spreadsheet and they have their accounts and they map it and they know exactly, one of my top SDRs knows, okay, Jess didn't answer, so I'm going to go reach out to Bob. And if Bob doesn't answer, I'm going to reach out to data engineering. And if data engineering doesn't, I'm going to call. And it's absolutely terrifying. But that's how they operate, is they know that the end game is not necessarily getting a meeting in an enterprise cycle. It's building the map and knowing exactly how to get there.
Yeah.
And yes, we've automated some of the manual research that we've done. But quite frankly, we had to sit there and figure it out and try. And now it's super easy to have enablement. Okay, this is the talk track. This is the message. But at the beginning, you just kind of had to figure out what the hell to say.
Yeah.
And see if they responded.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of gut work at the beginning. But I think really what makes some of my SDRs super successful is they are masters of their craft. And they, the biggest sort of moment was that they're telling me these 25-year-olds are going to bars in the Lower East Side and pitching feature stores. I'm like,
oh my gosh, what a proud moment.
They come back and they're like, I was at this bar and I met someone who's a data scientist and I was telling them all about X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I think you might be a loser. But it's so great to see when you have that enthusiasm, but also that conviction that you know what you're talking about. Yeah. That's a really magical moment.
I'm so happy you brought up account mapping because especially as it relates to enterprise sales, right? I think it's very easy to be like, well, here's an account and there's one buyer we need to get to. And if we can get to that buyer, everything will be unlocked. But to your point, it's so rare like that. You have a user, you have a decision maker, you have the signer, you have all these, a constellation of people, right? And it sounds like, yes, there's some tooling now that helps you just kind of find the initial research or scrape. But it sounds like if we were to look at that spreadsheet, it's still plugged in pretty manually.
100%. And I've worked in a ton of different, I think part of the reason I love building is I've also got the opportunity to work in tons of different verticals. I've done cybersecurity. I've done AI-based staffing. I've done B2B2C. Now I'm in enterprise developer tooling. And honestly, every company sometimes behaves differently. Sometimes what we, at Chalk, we have some folks where data science owns what we're doing or data engineering, or sometimes people make up their own damn titles, right? You get some of these companies where everyone's a member of technical staff.
Oh, gotta love those.
So what are you doing? Who's doing what?
Who are you?
Yeah. And the thing is with account mapping, it's really understanding where the breadcrumbs are going to lead you, right? Did they, everyone's like, oh, smart people read a 10K. It's most of us don't sell to public companies at the early stage. What else can you look at? Okay, are they writing something on LinkedIn? Do they have a point of view? But actually, one of the little hacks that my team does is they actually look at the CEO on LinkedIn, because the CEO often talks about what they think is important for their business. And they'll reference folks around them and say, okay, Jess, I see you're overseeing the data engineering function. You're working with Databricks. But I actually saw that, Kelly had been talking about this new thing in his blog. And you're like, oh, shit. They kind of know what they're talking about. Yeah. And to your point, getting an answer or getting pointed to the right direction, for me, is almost as critical as just getting to that meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you really, breadcrumbs is the right word. It's like you need to be able to follow the trail. And it's not always as simple as like, Jess, I see you're a Knicks fan, right? Like that. I think that used to kind of be this like thing, but
I kind of characterize them differently. I think like building rapport is important, right? I should shout this kid out. I got like an incredible email from ZoomInfo yesterday that I forwarded to my team. And these LinkedIns that you keep referring to of my spicy takes, he didn't just like link my LinkedIn and say, Alex, I read your LinkedIn post. He actually pulled out specific nuggets and then tied it to specific features for ZoomInfo Copilot.
What?
And he was like,
you're going to have to post a LinkedIn post on that, right? Like you're going to have to.
Because it was so great. He was like, I saw that like you've been going on about a tools first mindset. A lot of like operators really like give these kids these tools and F off. Like, this is how we would essentially fit into making X, Y, and Z successful. Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I read that email. I read it again. I forwarded it. And it wasn't just, hi, I read your LinkedIn. I see you're doing this. It was, I read your LinkedIn. I got this insight. I'm going to tie this insight into what we can do for you. And I think the CTA was almost like, I'd love to learn more about what you're thinking about.
Yes.
It was very well done.
Well, and that, again, I'm an AI skeptic. I mean, you can keep that in the episode or not, but like
I am too.
At a certain point, like an AI is not going to write the thoughtfulness.
I don't let
of
AI
that.
write our content, like, and some people be horrified, but we do not. We use Clay. We use I play around with Claude, especially for ad copy and variations. But I will not let AI write any of our emails right now.
That's so refreshing to hear, right?
I'm too terrified to like see what comes out.
Yeah. Well, the other point, again, let's just even going back to like SDR is sending a message of some sort somewhere. And I think especially with a lot of the enterprise sales that we've seen in general, like relatively good North Star is to say, hey, look, we know that because you're at this type of company, we imagine that talking to a lot of your peers, these are some of the top things they struggle with, right? And if they were to be like very consultative, they can say, these are some of the things in which we can also just share, what we're seeing too, and like maybe some of the ways that we can help. I guess, are you seeing a lot of iterations on that in terms of that like message or that CTA? And especially since you're selling to developers, right? Like I think that's like the underline of this episode.
Yeah, it's we don't have any PLG component right now. And so they're really kind of going in cold. Yeah. Yes, there's marketing and all that, but we're not operating on any, so-and-so clicked 3 times. I can go on a PLG rant too.
I guess it's like, a lot of people always like trying to be like, do you want a demo?
Yeah.
Do you want a demo? Right. And it's like, sure. I don't know. I don't know if I've always anytime seen people are like, I can't wait to sign up for a demo. I think there's a lot of ways and you can see a demo without just like having to click through. But like, I genuinely believe that you need some sort of like some sort of adding value of some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think, I'm starting to take some data, right? And some things that are working. And, what I've sort of found is in our particular motion at this particular moment in time, if someone has like read our docs and we see the engagement in the docs and we see exactly the behavior, this is the marketer in me. I see like the path that they've taken. They've gotten a case study. Like we have built that FOMO, not by some random logo drop. Like they actually got to touch and sort of see themselves. And then we sort of do this kind of like founder entrant. And the reason I do that is developers want to get in the shit. They want to see the code. They want to see how it looks and feels.
Yeah.
And if you're not open source, it's really hard to do that. Sure, you can do like a video demo, but you really aren't able to kind of say, what am I going to benefit from? And 2 things have really worked for us is the SDR really being the sort of like messenger of the content and knowing specifically what doc and when, instead of being like, do you have this problem? It's, I think you have this problem. Here is a link to our, feature documentation.
Yep.
And then I think like the other thing for SDRs as well are, they're able to kind of really, like I said, get the map, get folks educated, and really plant the seed of what the problem is. I think I tell my AEs something different where they need to come to a meeting with a point of view. But for SDRs, I think going in being like, hey, Jess, I know at Databricks, you guys are competing with Snowflake. We sell to Snowflake. Like FOMO, it's not really, it doesn't work on me. And I've absolutely answered cold emails in my day. I'm not a huge hypocrite. But, I think one of the things that people really screw up is, I'll get an email like, hey, Alex, Apple, NVIDIA, and Snowflake are using our cool marketing platform. Does that work for you? And you're like, do I look like Apple, NVIDIA, or Snowflake? Like, get the hell away from me.
Totally.
And so really that, hyper-personalization, I think just getting in the door, the way I best frame it is, I think that messaging works. I think all of that messaging shouldn't be in one email. I think introducing yourself, saying what you are, saying where you're from, very soft, light CTA. And then you can kind of go in and build, okay, I'm going to share them some content. Okay, maybe I learned a little bit more. I'm going to send them some particular code. And you're really telling a story instead of necessarily just trying to take the first email and be like, hi, I'm Alex and I work at here and we're this and like so-and-so and so-and-so, like open to see it. It's overwhelming versus doing something that's a little bit more tailored, high touch, and gradual.
I love that so much, only because, this is maybe a theme then for all drafting table episodes, but I think so many people try to do a product launch in one day. Yeah. This outbound email has to cover everything, right? When really, hopefully you get multiple touches. I imagine part of the fear is that I have to get it all out because if I don't get it out, then I might get marked as whatever spam, and then I'll never get a chance to touch this account again. Which again, you should not be writing spam. If you don't write spam, then hopefully that doesn't happen. But yes, that's I'm curious what you think about that. But I totally think that's spot on.
I think again, call my team and they'll say the same thing. I actually think patience is such a virtue in enterprise. I have this deal going where an SDR booked the meeting outbound in May. It went cold for reasons unknown. And then another person from another team then inbounded and was like, oh, we realized those two teams didn't talk to each other. Yeah. And we were able to sort of between whether it was retargeting, still she is relentless. I call her annoying, but something goes cold, every 3 or 4 weeks, she'll stay relevant. And again, people are on a buying journey too. And especially we're in infrastructure. I know you work with a lot of developer tools. It's all about timing. And someone might get on and be like, your shit's really cool. No, I can't rip out X, Y, or Z right now.
Yeah.
But being able to, again, play the long game, have patience, stay relevant. And I think that's the one thing that founders maybe get frustrated on with their early SDRs is they want that early dopamine hit, right? Because they get the dopamine. Oh, my friend's going here. Workbench introduced me to this person. And SDRs, they're not a plug and play, at least not in high ACV, long sales cycle companies. And so I think, being able to set some expectation for yourself that there is no magic button. And the dopamine hit takes a little bit of time. But when it's $100,000 deal, you go, oh shit, okay, it was worth it.
Yeah,
so it's a journey, I think, the outbounding process here in enterprise.
Patience, right? And it goes against, I think, what a lot of founders, why they bring on SDRs, is they think this is an immediate pipeline generator. I bring an SDR, of course they're going to generate leads. And I think to your point, it's still going to take time if you do it well, you do it correctly. I also love the point that you made about planting the seed for what the problem is, because I think the natural inclination is to really be like, this is our solution, this is our solution, this is our solution. When really, sometimes a huge thing you should do maybe is just even outlining or highlighting what the problem is to start, right?
I think the product marketer in me, I think it's both a blessing and a curse in SDR land, is I really like to cut through the bullshit. At the end of the day, you're selling to an end user, right? You're selling to someone who's banging their head against the wall or is filling out a security questionnaire or is making 700 cold calls as a recruiter. And you really want to speak to them, not an employee of so-and-so, right? I had a really successful campaign once because something we were selling was giving folks Friday nights back. They were manually doing all of this work. And we were just like, hey, man, are you stuck doing security questionnaires? Did you miss your kid's baseball game?
Yeah.
We can take that away. That's a little bit of wait, what do you mean you can take that away? You can take that away? That thing is driving me insane. And I think a lot of founders, who have cool shit syndrome, they do exactly what you said, which is they feature dump, right? Because they get it and they're this and they have this magical thing. And no offense, VCs have told them that their shit doesn't stink. Mm-hmm. And you kind of skip the part where, no, there's a person on the other end who hopefully is experiencing this problem. Speak to them.
Yeah.
And I think that often gets lost in the shuffle.
I mean, I like this whole cool shit syndrome. I'm totally going to use that.
That's totally a lot of founders
we're deep in that. Yeah. We're deep in that cool shit syndrome.
Yeah, and
moment.
It's totally, this is an old thing, right? The product sells itself and it's you sold it, right? Unless you're some crazy viral thing. And again, a lot of them blow up anyway. But really, it could be really cool if you don't know who it's cool for or why it's cool or how to tell them that it's cool. you're really just talking. You're just in an echo
Absolutely.
chamber.
Yeah. And again, I think a huge reminder is at the end of the day, the founder or the SDR manager is the one who really has to do that coaching of SDR. Because generally, they're probably not going to know all of these things you just mentioned. And so I think, if we see an SDR email and it's not great, like we have to remember, like,
it's always our fault.
And so I'm just so curious, like, if we were to go ask your SDRs, like, what are the things Alexandra's coached you on that, like, I would so love to get into, like, what you coach and how you get them to be awesome at what they do.
I mean, the first thing, I kind of mentioned this already, is the patience, right? And I think that also is really important from above, that you also reinforce that you're in it together. Yes. We're working on it together. We can talk about comp, but like think through a ramp of like, your ramp is really a period of learning, not a period of producing. And I think the other thing that's really interesting, and this is sort of, I think known by the folks who know, is it's really all about attitude. Like, if you're an early stage founder looking to bring on an SDR team, think about how many times you've pivoted or moved away or changed something or backtracked on something. Your SDR is a human, and you want them to be on your team and have that adaptability and have that flexibility. And at the end of the day, the only way to kind of do that is someone with a really great fucking attitude. Yeah. And that for me is what I constantly reinforce with my SDRs is like, your number is my number, right? If your number's low, we did this together. Like, where can we improve? Where can we deep dive? And I think the other thing, and I learned this from a director of BDR who worked for me, his name's Brad Sullivan, every single one of them are different. They're all sort of special snowflakes and different motivations. And yes, maybe you're at SDR 45 and you have some big thing. Maybe it's more plug and play. But at the beginning, you might be a team of 1, 2, 3. They're all different people with different motivations who are likely there for different reasons. Yeah. And it's really up to you in management to play to their strengths, understand how to talk to them, instead of, again, just like hitting that button and thinking, more dials, more activity, like that's going to yield the best results. You really need to understand what motivates them.
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole nother episode, which we could do, just like interviewing SDRs.
Yeah.
But I guess if you could give like the one tip that you're like, if you talk to an early stage founder and you're like, you're about to hire your first SDR, this is the interview question I never forget to ask.
I mean, I'll cheat and say always make them write something. That's sort of just different, is let them write something and see. It's the whole MBB, right? See how they think.
And is it writing an email or is it like anything?
What my co-founders had done at Chalk, which was super awesome. They had done a lot of things right by the time I joined, was they had a pretty detailed take home that was sort of across the org, finding an account that you think was a good fit, write them an email. What would you do? And so you really get, not just do they have an understanding? Have they done their homework, which we all want to see, but like, how would they think through some of these challenges? Yeah. And are they approaching it differently from maybe the way that I would? And another question I think is sort of really well done, that I'm going to steal from someone, is when is the time that you work the hardest in your life?
I love that.
Let them sort of be able to articulate that back to you. And oftentimes you'll find people be like, I had this like hard AP class. And you're like, okay, no, I hand to Christ, I get like things from high school. And you're like, okay. But then there's some really really awesome ones, whether it's juggling kids or, something like a family emergency in college or a special project, and sort of being able to see like, okay, like, do they understand what they're getting into? Do they want to work? Do they like working hard? Yeah. I think that's a really, really elucidating question.
I love that question. And not just for SDRs, probably for everyone, but especially for an SDR that has to do
100%.
The reality is like there's a lot of rejection, right? Probably the most rejection out of anyone at a company. That's another very stealable one. Anything else on interview?
Yeah, I think, there's some SDRs where I met them and I was like, I just know. And then there's some where like they have actually kind of surprised me a little bit. There definitely is, you'll see this a lot being said, that I think some of the best SDRs were bartenders or, they were like really great athletes. I think the athlete thing is a little bit overdone, but they do really show coachability that I think is really important. Yeah. But I think being able to really look past the specific skills and say, okay, how have they solved problems? Yeah. And whatever your background is, how did you solve that problem? I think really digging into not just the day-to-day of a past role, but how did they think and how did they solve the problems that were at hand? And you bring up the best point, which is so much rejection all the time. Like, I've had to, one of my poor SDRs the other day sent an email and the guy was like, "Are you married?" And it's like, no, dude, like, no, like she's young and she's blonde and it's just horrifying.
Yeah.
I've had people, be on the phone and someone tell them to go fuck themselves.
I mean, it's horrible.
It's really
really horrible stuff.
And I think the best ones take that as, well, fuck you. Like, I'm going to go get the next one instead of, it's an ego bruise or they have to take a walk. It's like, okay, fuck you. And I'm going to go back out and I'm going to do 5 more dials.
Yeah.
I think being motivated by rejection is a really hard needle to thread. Yeah. But if you can get that, it's really magical.
I love that. A bunch of New Yorkers as SDRs. Really. You brought up this awesome point about ramp as a period of learning. And I think it goes back again, maybe the theme of drafting table is also patience, because I think a lot of people are like, well, ramp, let's say it's a 3-month ramp traditionally. How do I make that shorter, right? How do I get them productive faster, right? And I think about this especially for SDRs because a lot of times SDRs do not come from the industry they're selling into. I mean, they just can't have, right? So, you do have to give them time to learn like the jargon, the terminology, the technology. So what pro tips do you have in terms of onboarding an SDR? How do you get them to know the industry and the space deeply?
My SDRs email on their 5th day. And the reason for that is just do it. Just do it. And you look back and some of these emails are absolutely horrifying and you're just like, oh my God. But then they'll see something they wrote a couple weeks ago and they're like, holy shit. Look how much I grew. Look how much I know. Back to the pitching feature stores on the Lower East Side. Yeah. I think you have to do it in parallel. I like to get them used to the motion by being like, draft something, pick an account list, go. And then we'll sort of work in parallel, and say, okay, we're going to work with our machine learning engineers and you get more, more demos, or you're going to read the docs because you're going to get in there and you're going to go, I don't know what anything means in any of this documentation. I am still an SDR1 essentially at Chalk. Yeah. But if you can get them used to the muscle and the craft, that's something that you can almost do immediately. And I think the best way is to just have them do it. I think SDR school and slides and onboarding and training at the companies that we're talking about is such a monumental waste of time.
Yeah, that's so helpful to hear. I mean, I think it goes back to your point in addition to patience, but also, I guess, forgivability of imperfection. Because I think perhaps that's the other part is well, we can't have them talking to customers until they really know the product, which again, it's it's ongoing, right? So being okay with being okay, maybe those emails weren't that great and we have to be okay with that. And maybe some accounts got some emails that weren't, tip-top shape.
100%. And I think, that's something I try to do when I'm managing externally is an email kind of sucked, but we tried, right? We tried. I mean, the other way to do it is we're sending really templated, I had really high conviction at Chalk that sending high volume, highly templated emails and sequences was not going to scale. Yeah. But on the flip side, to kind of do all this, experimentation and iteration meant that I was going to be reading every single one of their emails. Right. That's also a massive drag. Right. So you kind of have to be comfortable with a little bit of and just, but also with every, you're learning, right? You're seeing open rates or engagement rates or, all these little sort of leading indicators. Yeah. But I think, I don't, high volume calling is a little bit different, but I think, if you're really in a high email or LinkedIn or social selling motion, just kind of let them do it and go from there. And then you can kind of continue to iterate. But yeah, I'm a tough one with that is I just throw you right in.
That's great. And knowing though that they have the ability to iterate, right? And there, I guess there's 2 points. I do want to go to metrics because I think that's part of it. But can we talk about cold calling for a second? Because cold calling, again, maybe some people think is back in vogue. Some people think is not in vogue. What's your hot take at the moment?
Yeah. So my team actually doesn't cold call right now for a highlight. For something you mentioned earlier, which is we sell a highly technical product. And when they're able to give super specific, highly technical answers, the door really opens. And I know a lot of cold calling in other industries, and I've implemented this and can go into it. You really just kind of want to get the meeting on the phone, right? You want to overcome the objection, get the problem across in 45 seconds, and see if you can get the meeting. Developers, I think it's very different. And so, yes, we can go right to voicemail and, I sent you an email. Who gives a shit? But I think in certain situations, and, I have been dead wrong in every company that I've been in over the past few years I never would have thought LinkedIn for Chalk. In my previous company, we sold to security, would have never thought security would pick up a phone. Yeah. Right? They're the most guarded, totally. Most private folks. And with that, that really was about tooling. We used Orem back then. I think Nooks is a really good tool right now. But for those, couple folks that we had, it really was autopilot for the cold calling, and then you saved your sort of brain space for the more tailored sort of emails and also really tailored account mapping. But I do not think cold calling is dead. I think it might be dead in some industries, like not to be a self-hater, but like marketing, I think, has the lowest pickup rate. Actually, even more than like sales, because for marketing, we kind of are like, we're busy, we know what's going on. A lot of sales folks and BDR directors I've worked with will actually pick up almost every cold call and see how they do. A director of mine actually hired 2 folks who cold called them.
I love that. That's the best hack and trick in the book.
I've turned it around on a few people. Being like, this is really good. Do you want to interview? But I think, basically saying anything is dead is shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. It reminds me, one of our companies is in the security space, and they had at one point a lot of success with security podcasts. And I was like, who is listening to security podcasts? Some people are, at least in their ICP and what they were trying to target at the time.
That's the thing, is like these preconceived notions of how other people buy. Like, yes, marketing should be doing a lot of work and understanding like the market and how people operate. But I had this really strange thing at my previous company. I was mostly spiking in marketing, where our number one channel was a meme, a paid advertising on LinkedIn meme. And the reason for that was, we had a really interesting play there in that it sort of went viral. And we had CISOs and analysts and all these folks tagging each other because it was such a painful problem we were solving. I mean, like, Jess, check this out. Remember Thursday? Oh, God, that was awful. And it actually created this like weird viral moment where I think the CISO of ServiceNow was on there. And I was like, oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
But the cool thing was the SDRs were able to sort of act on that. And they were watching this conversation happen. They were really tailoring it. But yeah, these like security podcasts or memes or, we do a lot with Reddit. It's really, again, that whole constellation, that whole kind of breadcrumb. And, I think I wrote another cheesy LinkedIn post about this, but the best messaging is going to come out of your customers' mouths anyway.
Yes.
And so if you can listen to these podcasts that somebody is on and hear them articulate the problem, it's going to be written way better than Claude.
I cannot wait for an SDR to listen to this podcast.
Yay.
And then be like, dear Alexandra, I heard you say so many amazing things. Okay, awesome. Last point then really is on metrics, right? And I know you already had a hot take actually earlier, so maybe we can even refresh what that hot take was. But I do think, again, SDRs do have to hit their numbers. Yep. It is what it is, right? Maybe the numbers don't always reflect the effort that was put in or the actual kind of book of accounts that were given. I mean, I'm just so curious, like, how you think about success and how you measure whether an SDR is successful or not.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think this really is motion specific. If you're full cycle, high volume, selling into restaurants, like, really activity is going to be the first thing. And I think regardless, activity is important. Anyone that's like, I work smarter, not harder, then if you worked harder, you'd be twice as good. So I think the whole, right, like activity is at the core of everything. But I think, I work with an incredible RevOps partner, and we actually tried to turn this on our head a little bit because I was so afraid if we just put email sent per day on a board that everyone could see, it wasn't really reflecting the quality of the outreach.
Yeah.
What was being said in the responses. It was just kind of your typical funnel waterfall, and you actually couldn't really tell what was happening. And so we actually put it on ourselves that we scored accounts and we scored interactions and we scored the quality of replies and replies from different levels of target ICPs. And we really look at it as how much did they penetrate this account? How much did they essentially move a meeting to be more qualified?
Yeah.
But it took a lot of investment.
Yeah.
And I could do a whole podcast on why data matters. But that was something we really had to do in a high ACV environment was I really didn't want to incentivize the wrong behavior by having a big board that said email sent.
Yes.
But to your point, we need to have some idea, right? Do we hire another one? Do we fire one?
Right.
And I think it's really honing in on what's important to your motion and trying to be as flexible with designing reporting that reflects the outcome that you want to drive.
Totally. Yeah. And that's why a metrics that works for a security company may not work for a developer company. I mean, depending on your ACVs, depending on your motion. Mm-hmm. That's such a good reminder. It's not one size fits all. So
yeah, I think, again, for me, it's all about incentivizing the right behavior. I think another thing, too, that, again, this is like something that founders, I think, sometimes get stuck with is we all want more at-bats, right? Just math tells you the more at-bats you're going to get, the highly likelihood you're going to close more deals. But I think, starting some rigor early on what accounts and quality of accounts and signals that you've seen, I would rather have an SDR hit 50% of their number, but all of them were target accounts, then
Very
hit
quality,
you know 10 of their numbers buying some bullshit company that just raised money who has no interest in buying your platform. I try to be really careful again of meetings being the only metric, because you sometimes incentivize people to do things because they're humans and they want to not get fired or they want to hit their bonus. And so you really have to align the incentives that you want to drive.
That's such a great pro tip. Any other hot takes? I mean, we could do a whole nother hour just honestly, I feel like, on your hot takes.
Yeah, no, it's super fun. I really love managing SDRs, and I've actually seen there's been more of a migration outside of sales to working under marketing, which I think is really important. They're also a brand weapon for you, right?
Yeah.
If you have an initial terrible SDR experience, you have a really shitty perception of your brand from the get-go.
Yeah.
But I think, something we didn't really get to is some of the best SDRs I've ever had no interest in going into sales. And I think a lot of founders will go, okay, there's a big chocolate bar at the end of the run, and if they go there because they're going to make more money, and that's the motivation. Some of the most successful SDRs came to me and they were like, I just want to learn what sales is, and I want to go do marketing, or I want to go be an account manager, or I want to be a founder one day, and I really want to learn sales skills. And some of the incentives that have worked for them is like, can I pick the next restaurant that we go with leadership? Some of them it's a title bump. Some of them I think that we grossly undervalue our SDRs is equity. They often get very small equity grants. And, I think the ones that are there and they want to build and they want to, be in the boat with you, equity refreshes are so much more important than these 5K salary bumps that don't really turn into anything. And so it's really understanding what motivates them and designing a system around it. But yeah, some of the most successful sort of incentives have nothing to do with OT.
It's such a good reminder, right? And that, again, you said earlier, but they are in some ways different snowflakes.
Yeah. All of sales, they're all special. I guess engineers too. We're all special snowflakes, right?
We're all snowflakes in SaaS. Yeah. Awesome. Well, if you were to fast forward through this episode, what do you think is the one TLDR, which is going to be really hard?
That you don't have a clue what the fuck is going to work until you start doing it. Myself included. Like, you have to go in open mind, clear heart, whatever that movie quote is, and just have some humility and know that they need to be your partners and not your employees.
That's so great. Who do you think we should interview next, or at some point during this season?
Oh God, do you need a specific name?
If you have one.
Honestly, I think it would be really interesting to bring on an early stage SDR. I think you should actually think about bringing in some of these more ICs. My first SDR I was so blessed with here at Chalk, her name is Caroline. I worked with an incredible SDR at my previous company named Connor. But I would actually, if you're trying to reach folks that actually, turn the knobs, I would bring on some ICs who have done it before.
I mean, I would love to have an SDR at the mic tell a founder, like, these are the things you didn't know.
I know one. I really do. She's in Vail right now.
Right.
But actually, she had this opportunity to lead a entire go-to-market session on what made her successful and how she did things. And, that was a really great moment for her, is being able to say, okay, I've learned these things. How can I sort of, share those?
That's brilliant.
And I think we don't give the mic enough to ICs or, those
so
frontline
brilliant.
builders. And I didn't plan that in ahead, but I actually think I would listen to that because I think it's, again, a really big motivator for them. And I think there's incentive to be honest.
Sweet. Okay. Totally booking that next. How can people follow you online?
I do LinkedIn now.
You do LinkedIn.
Oh gosh.
And you do I think you do a very authentic job for what it's worth. Like, when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is Alexandra writing it.
Yeah, it's good and it's bad. I don't have like a work mask and a home mask. Like, I am authentically myself. I told you I vomited like the first time I met you. And so I think the only way for that to work in LinkedIn and for people to kind of hear what you want to say is know that it's not written by AI, that it's actually something that you think, and there's an authentic perspective, right? Yeah. Like, I will never write cold calling is dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think writing as yourself, speaking as yourself is the best way to create connections.
I am so grateful that you puked on that bus.
And it kept us talking. And I'm thankful for Peggy, and I'm thankful for all of us putting us together. But yeah, this is super awesome. And I think there's just a lot founders can learn about some of these go-to-market functions.
Well, thank you so much, Alexandra, for being with us on the drafting table.
Thank you.
So appreciate it.
Appreciate it.